Hi folks, Indie Truck Davy here. Now, it's a wee bit unusual for Davy to broadcast on a Sunday, but I'm on a day off, I'm relaxing, and that means I'm perusing the news, whether that be mainstream media or alternative media, which is generally what I do on my day off if I've not got my face stuck in a PDF file or I'm not reading some academic survey, which you'll not be surprised to most of you guys who watch me. Even though I don't come across that way. But as I was perusing the media today, especially social media, alternative media is a better term for it, I come across a video from a bunch of independent journalists that I follow called Political Joe. And I had to deal with a debate that took part that happened a few days ago in the Commons. And things are fine, thanks, look Indy. And I thought, I'll give this a watch. Now, it's about 11 minutes and 30 long. But it was a fascinating piece of work for Political Joe, who have the sort of technology and ken and how to do this stuff. Now, I was watching the Sarosa channel live last night. He's on very, very late. I finished quite late, so and he's able to do more technological stuff than me as well. But I thought I would like to play this one for you, because there's a lot of things in this that needed commentating on, and no doubt that the clip that I see had some commentary on it behind it. But I'm going to offer up some commentary on it today. And I want to thank Political Joe for putting this compilation together. Okay, before we do that, I'll put up John's super chat. Hi Davey, some funds for the food banks. Up working in Aberdeen, still eyes on the prize. Tell you John, I've got that high vis vest for you, sir. You might just make it to that driving legend and still a driving god. Because you're progressing in your career, lad, and good on you. There's very few people coming into this profession today. In fact, as you know, I'm getting out it. I've put in my term. I get begging letters for the government every other week, telling me they'll find me the right job for the right time, the next thing, if I just get my arse back in a truck, because there's a shortage of truck drivers. Nah, I prefer the life I've got now. I've got time to peruse current affairs. I've got time for a bit of academic studies. I've got time for the charity work that you guys allow us to do. And I've got a job which still involves huge vehicles. It keeps me physically and mentally active in the evening. So anyway, let's go on with this video, shall we? Because this is what brought me to the screens today. And I want to thank Political Joe, I'm a subscriber, for this video. I will be stopping it at certain points. To make points. Okay? So let's get this underway.
No amount of rowing back by the US State Department can change that what the United States President intimated earlier on this week amounts to ethnic cleansing. Is that UK government of the same view that what his plan would amount to, if prosecuted, would be ethnic cleansing? And if not, what does the UK government understand ethnic cleansing to be? And I've heard an awful lot of warm words from the government and ambition about what we believe in, what we stand for, what we've delivered around the immediate humanitarian crisis. But don't let's forget that the horrors that have happened over the last 18 months are because of the vacuum that has been created by international inaction over the plight of the Palestinians for the last 50 years. What will this government do to change that drastic situation?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did list the decisions that the UK government took, which were different from those of the previous government a few moments ago. We have been determined to ensure that when it comes to the ICC and the ICJ, for example, that we're very clear about their jurisdiction, that also we removed that ban on UNRWA funding as well, and that we've supported, for example, moves at the UN through the Security Council that have been specifically focused on trying to push forward the two-state solution that is so important. And, Mr. Speaker, I'd refer to my previous remarks about the Prime Minister underlining the importance of that right to return. Thank you.
Now, folks, let's make this clear. This idea that the UK upholding international law, nope, providing diplomatic, financial and military aid, aiding and abetting in the genocide in Gaza. And what this woman does in this video, I'll make it quite clear, are weasel words. Their speech, they're going to talk about what they've done. Now let's talk about what they've done in this particular question. What the reply was to the question is, we adhere to international law, and it's important that we get humanitarian aid to these people. But humanitarian aid to these people has been secondary to selling Israel weapons, providing Israel with diplomatic cover, providing Israel with military assistance in killing these people, with flights. I don't normally mention sources, and as you know, I do most of my own research myself. But if you're looking for a quick way to find out about the UK's complicity in the genocide in Gaza and don't want to do the research yourself, Declassified on YouTube. Brilliant stuff. Now, as this video goes on, we're going to watch this Labour Minister use weasel words and wriggle out of a very important point when it comes to the force of international law and UK soft power. But let's move on to the next question.
The world is watching, and let us be clear in this House that how the UK reacts to this brazen attempt to further rip up international law today will echo for generations. 61,000 Palestinians killed, a ceasefire hanging on a thread, and a blueprint now to ethnically cleanse Palestinians and resettle the land. So can the Minister tell this House where exactly has diplomacy and refusing to sanction Israel led us, when Palestinians are now facing mass expulsion, reoccupation and resettlement, all whilst the international rules-based order has been ripped to shreds?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question. I believe it has been incredibly important for the UK to engage diplomatically in relation to this conflict. I think it's absolutely right that we have sought to work with partners on these issues, that we have supported, for example, statements within the UN Security Council, that we have worked with partners in the region, that we have sought to achieve change, that we've sought to ensure that that ceasefire, which was agreed, was achieved. The release of hostages, we need to see more release, that surge of aid into Gaza, and ultimately that we work with other countries towards the two-state solution that is so necessary. I believe that has been important, Mr Speaker, and I believe that members in this House would not have forgiven the UK Government if we had not engaged in those actions determinedly. He asked about the UK's position and referred to the situation in relation to right to return particularly. We again have stated this very clearly, indeed at the highest level, with the Prime Minister's statement on this yesterday, when he said that those who are literally walking through the rubble to try and get back to their homes and communities in Gaza must be allowed home. And of course, in saying that, he is restating international law, Mr Speaker.
What a bag of bollocks. What a lot of hot air and waffle. Being permitted to go back to their homes in northern Gaza. Permitted? Their homes have been flattened. And why were they expelled in the first place? They're their homes, according to her words. Was that no ethnic cleansing? Was that no war crime? Was that no illegal under the Genocide Convention, which we are signed up to? Keir Starmer's statement that he wants them to have the right to return was like saying to fish, get back in that fucking barrel. There's a shooting gallery coming. And you know what? When you look at Keir Starmer's background, and I keep telling you, your citizens is your friend, look into his background and his connections with the Israel lobby and with Christian Zionism. There's not just a Zionist faction in Judaism, it also runs through Christianity. But you don't have to take my word for it. There are churches in Glasgow where it says the Zionist Church of Scotland. Now, I'm not going to say exactly where, but if you want to see the most obvious one, then there's a big incinerator in Glasgow, round about the Rutherglen area. And as you drive up towards that incinerator, on the right hand side, there is a Church of Scotland with a big sign outside that says Zionist Church of Scotland. You don't need to take my word for it. I've told you where the location is roughly. Go and have a look if you're in the Glasgow area. But that there was obfuscation. Notice I'm trying to be quite polite in this one. And I'm trying to be quite concise in this one. But the idea that the UK will provide diplomatic cover, military aid, and financial help. And when I talk about military aid, we're not just talking about selling them arms. We're talking about actual intervention, complicity, actual actions, spy flights over Gaza. And what information was given to Israel, we have never been told and won't be told. It'll be wrapped up in the Secrecy Act and put away in that big fucking vault called 100 years. We'll all be gone before we know the truth. Every one of us. But this idea, the right to return, shooting fish in a barrel. Watch this space. Let's move on to the next one. Shall we? Let's see what the next question brings.
But, Mr. Speaker, does the Minister not accept that how we got here is after 16 months of weakness and vacillation by this government and the one previously? As we contemplate, as she said, hundreds of thousands of people returning to their homes to dig their relatives out from under the rubble, the welcome return of hostages, the 40,000 odd orphans and even more amputees, does she not recognise that the hot air that we've heard from both governments, frankly, has got us to a situation where the Israelis are demolishing buildings in Jenin with people still inside them, and the President of the United States openly contemplating the forcible transfer of the Palestinians. And if she accepts that vacillation, could she, just for the avoidance of doubt, confirm a couple of things? First of all, are Arabs, and particularly Palestinians, entitled to the same protections under international law as everybody else? And secondly, do we still affirm our support for UN Security Council Resolution 3236, which guarantees the Palestinians safety, security and sovereignty in their own land? And if that's the case, when is she going to just stop just talking about it and actually take steps and action to enforce these matters in law?
So will the government now finally commit to an immediate recognition of a Palestinian state along the 1967 borders? The welcome ceasefire has given us the opportunity.
I'm going to stop it for a wee second before we get to the recognition of a Palestinian state thing here. Do you notice that we didn't get a clip of that reply? Now, the Conservative MP that asked the question shows you they're no all fucking heartless, which surprises us all. But let's get back to this recognising of a Palestinian state. This is fucking hilarious.
Opportunity to flood Gaza with aid, but the freeze to US aid funding is reportedly impacting the humanitarian response as NGOs are forced to lay off aid workers. So will the Minister share what the impact has been on the humanitarian response in Gaza, including British funded programmes, and what conversations is the government having with our American partners to persuade them that abolishing US aid would be a dire mistake?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for the important points that she has raised. Mr Speaker, the UK's position on the right to return could not be clearer. I quoted previously the Prime Minister's remarks on this, which were most definitely in strong relief that Palestinians who are going back to their homes and communities in Gaza must be allowed home.
What a wee second. By the way, I make no apology for having a wee sip of beer and smoking a day there, and I'm on a day off, I'm relaxing. But the right to return, as I said in the previous clip, fish in a barrel, get back in that barrel, fish. The second barrage is coming. But the return to their homes and communities, there are no fucking homes and communities left in the Gaza Strip. Or the infrastructure, everything is gone. There are only piles of rubble. But let's get to the question of the UK government recognising Palestine and what moves they have taken with President Trump. Well, on the President Trump thing, she's going to body swerve it on the recognising Palestine as a state, which would bring into force the full force of international law. I'm going to body swerve that and all.
They must be allowed to rebuild, and of course that is in line with international law, Mr Speaker, so there's no doubt about the UK's position on this whatsoever. She asked about the position on recognition, Mr Speaker. I responded to that when it came to the words of my honourable friend who raised this urgent question. The UK has been clear around this, that we believe that it is important that both Palestinians and Israelis are able to have sovereignty that is required for them, able to have security that is necessary in order to live in peace, and we will ensure that the UK's decision around this on recognition is a contribution to the process towards a two-state solution that we desperately need. Over the last...
Now, the UK's contribution to it. Contribution to it? Now, if the UK wanted to exercise soft power, the easiest way to do it would be just to say, listen, America, listen, certain states in Europe, listen, Israel, as a friend, we recognise the Palestinian state. After all, we are responsible for the Balfour carry on, which created the Israeli state. And remember, the Israeli state is even been younger than America. And America is only about 250 years old. In fact, 1948 now, what we're talking about, 52 years plus 25. So the Israeli state, as we know it today, has only been around for 77 years. And anybody wants to go to biblical references, bow your head. That's like the Romans turning up in Bath and demanding people get to fuck because they built Bath. Wouldn't they fly? This doesn't fly. Let's move on, shall we? But the UK is not about to recognise a Palestinian state. What I will say is, before we move on, is everybody's after the one thing, and that's what's in the Bay of Gaza. If you don't know what that is, your search engine's your friend.
16 or so months, we have seen Palestinian people being displaced from their homes and communities, on many occasions, on not just once, but perhaps twice or three times. So for the President of the United States to suggest a further forced displacement seems to me to be not just illegal, but also incredibly cruel. In diplomacy, we believe that timing is everything. So in order to give the Palestinian people some protection from outside actors who seem to wish to dictate what should happen to them, is it not now the time that the international community and our government should recognise Palestine as a state and give it all the international supports and strengths that that gives it?
Minister.
Now, for people here in Scotland, as you can see, that came for rain benches. That came for rain benches. That's the Scottish Labour MP. The reply, make of it as you will. I'll tell you what, I'll make it when it's done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my honourable friend was right to refer to the levels of displacement. As I said previously, Mr. Speaker, 90% of the population of Gaza have been displaced. As she says, some twice or three times, some up to 9 times having been displaced. And when we consider the impact on whole families having to move so many times, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that we're all disturbed by that.
Does the Minister recognise that the lack of recognition?
So, the UK government recognises these people have been illegally moved and their homes destroyed. Up to 9 times they've been displaced. But on the question of recognising the state of Palestine in order to bring in the full force of international law, did you notice the reply there was skipped? And that was one of their own MPs from Glasgow. What was interesting about that, when you understand the debating chamber in Westminster, it is good manners and etiquette to turn after saying Mr. Speaker and make your reply to the person who asked the question. Did you notice that the Minister kept her back to her own MP there? And if you didn't know about Westminster etiquette, they're a wee bit for you. Let's move on.
Recognition of Palestine now is denying the protection that people across Palestine need.
Now, before this reply, this was a very important question, because what the MP there, sitting across another one of their own, sitting across the Minister said was to bring in the full force of international law, recognising Palestine was the right thing to do. Let's see what the Minister has to say in reply.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That protection is critically important at every stage, Mr. Speaker. The UK government has been that we have seen too much far too much death and destruction in Gaza, Mr. Speaker, that we are seeing now truly heartrending scenes of people trying to return to communities that have been destroyed. We have seen over 46,000 people being killed, Mr. Speaker. That population requires our support, and I do not believe that is contingent on political circumstances. Thank you.
She does not believe that they have to be that recognising Gaza is correct, and that aiding the people of Gaza is no contingent on recognising Gaza. Whereas if you want the full effect of international law to apply equally to Gaza, the same way it applies equally to everybody else in the world, then you have to recognise them as a people. And the UK state refuses to do that. And there are multiple reasons for it. And one is economics, because Israel is a huge consumer of defence materials, and the UK is a seller of defence materials, as we call them. But there are no such thing, or there is no such thing as a defensive weapon. The term weapon makes it quite clear that it isn't for defensive purposes. Defensive weapon is a made-up term. It's a fucking weapon. Let's move on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for her update yesterday. It's greatly appreciated. But will the Minister agree with me that we are standing on the precipice of a new dangerous world order, leaving one behind that bases global peace on global justices that we have recognised? Because we have close to 48,000 Palestinian men, women and children being killed. Hundreds of thousands returning to once was their homes to rubble. And as we speak, Minister, mothers are looking for their children in the rubble. Whilst at the same time, we have the most powerful man of the most powerful country in the world behaving like a gangster, talking about replacing these people from their land, replacing their homes with beachfront properties, creating casinos and a Riviera. Is this the time, Minister, where we categorically utilise the same words as we do for other conflicts and call this out for what it is, and that is the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people? And we must immediately put into place the recognition of a Palestinian state. Can we stand up to President Trump and tell him Gaza is not for sale?
Well, the answer to that's no, but I'll let you hear it for your own words.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stated in response to the previous question, the UK has been and will continue to be an advocate for the international rules-based order. That's incredibly important.
That's incredibly important, is it? So why not recognise the Palestinian people and the Palestinian state and bring in the full force of international law to advocate for the Palestinian people and the Palestinian state? This is horrific. Absolutely horrific. Earlier she talked about people must be allowed to return to their communities, and later in her statement she says there is no communities, they're devastated, they're fucking gone, they've been flattened. And they've been flattened with the UK being complicit in it. Because as I've stated before, the UK Westminster government has provided diplomatic aid, financial aid and military aid and direct intervention in the genocide in Gaza by flying in materials from RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus and flying spy flights over the Gaza Strip from that air base and giving the information to Israel. How many people have we, the people of these islands, become complicit in killing because of the stance of our government? Now let's see how she rounds this one up by body swerving the notion of recognising Palestine as a state
need to see those rules being upheld by all, and of course we will continue to advocate for that at the UN and in relation to all countries, Mr. Speaker. We've been very clear about our position. It must be possible for people to return. I agree with him about the horrendous situation so many Gazans are facing. We've already talked about this in this urgent question, Mr. Speaker, and I would just underline again what the Prime Minister said yesterday very clearly. When it comes to Gazans returning to their homes and communities, they must be allowed home.
Well, that was fascinating, wasn't it? I hope that I managed to bring up some interesting points on how the Minister avoided answering questions. And when she did answer questions, it was, oh aye, oh aye, oh aye, we agree, but we're not going to do what's right. We are not going to do what is good for humanity. We're going to kowtow to our biggest ally and the state that is committing these atrocities. We're not going to stand up and morally say the way that these islands morally said after the Second World War. Never again, and no, it's not permitted. When we look at the Second World War, the Geneva Convention, the rules-based international order which we understand today, the World Trade Organization, the bringing in to order in order that we have things like the ICJ and the ICC and the European Court of Human Rights and things like that to settle disputes with a legal framework so that things like what's going on in Gaza isn't happening or doesn't happen. But what we have seen in recent years is this powerful undermine that order. And interesting that, isn't it? When I make a point like that, I get a disconnection. Anyway, John, thanks. One last bit on this. It doesn't help a certain Labour MP talking tripe to Israel on taxpayers visiting the genocide factories and not even bothering to answer to his constituents. Fair statement, John. Anyway, guys, to say I am relaxing. I thought that was interesting. I needed a few comments. Thanks for watching. Watch it back again, folks. Watch the whole episode. To say thanks to Politics Joe, I just took this snippet that was available to me. I didn't snip it myself, and thought I would comment on the way that the UK government is wriggling out, helping to bring in the full force of international law by not recognising the state of Palestine. Listen, you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'll be getting my dinner shortly, and then probably doze here in my chair most of the night. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And Charlie Cat says hello. The table cat.